Okay, nice.
Okay, we into recording, so we have to cut our talk.
All right. See you later.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I am Kayan Sweet, and thank you so much for joining us as we explore new horizons and discuss young people moving to Canada as we try to wrap up our contribution to the Patrono Festival for 2021, but we're taking it a new direction tonight. So I'm going to pass over to Canon Peter to formally welcome and to say opening prayers, and we shall start the ball rolling. Canon Peter?
Thank you, Dr. Skeet, and welcome to all those who are sharing with us on Zoom and Facebook. We are recording for Facebook. It's a joy to present this. A lot of our young people have been asking about it and they've been seeking to come on. And we welcome those from the St. Peter Parish and other parts of Barbados who are coming on, other young people who have shown interest in being part of it. Not only our young people, but some of our older people who are on welcome, and some of the older people represent young minds also. Their children, their grandchildren are looking for new horizons. We're looking for job opportunities overseas. Canada seems to be the place opening the doors to them and to us. And so it is good to look at it, look at prospects. I don't want to introduce the panelists. I'll leave Dr. Skeet to introduce the panelists, but again, let me say welcome and thanks to the panelists who are going to be a part of this evening. Let me get on with my job and my assigned task and ask us all to pray. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings of this life. We thank you for your presence and your guidance in what we say and what we do. Thank you for inspiring us and inspiring young minds, and for the opportunities given to persons, especially our young people, to be creative, to be innovative in their lives. We thank you, God, for guiding them and guiding us. We thank you for the blessings of home and family, for parents, and for the units as they continue to work. We pray especially for those dysfunctional units and dysfunctional families. Families that have been broken, families that have experienced trials and troubles, those families that are in mourning and have lost loved ones. And we pray for your continual presence and blessings on us all as we live and work together. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Again, good evening to all, and welcome, and hope that we are able to share and enjoy the presentation this evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Canon. Over to tonight's panelists. So I will spotlight these two lovely individuals for the duration of the program. First up, we have Ms. Shontel Atkinson. And Shontel is a registered Canadian immigration consultant living and based in Toronto, Canada. Also with us, we have Mr. Brandon Hinkson. And Mr. Brandon Hinkson is an upcoming university first-year fresher in law. Speaking it into being, Brandon, work with me. And we also have recorded videos from Mr. Nicholai Lynch, a Barbadian who has recently graduated from Ryerson University with a BSc in structural engineering, and he works in downtown Toronto. So Nicholai will not be live with us, but he has sent all of his videos to all of his questions, so his contribution will be well made. Now, how it works is we will have a guided discussion surrounding 9 questions, and then afterwards, hopefully we have time left, we can open up the space for 10 minutes of question and answer from the wider audience. If there are any questions that you have burning and it cannot wait until the end, feel free to put it into the chat discussion, and we can try to get the panelists, incorporated into their discussions and contributions as well. So over to you, Shontel, and then Brandon, and I will then read Nicholai's bio. Over to you. So just introduce yourself, tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much, Kian. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shontel Atkinson, and as I said, I'm a registered Canadian immigration consultant. I've been in the field of Canadian immigration for over 8 years, and throughout my career, I have worked both in the private sector, and I've also worked for boutique firms in Toronto, all across Toronto. At present, I am the managing director of my own firm, Atkinson Immigration, and I have been in operation for over 3 years. In addition to my career as an immigration consultant, practicing in all areas of Canadian immigration, I also teach immigration law at a college, CDI College, and I have been teaching immigration law for well over 3 years. I'm very passionate about immigration, very passionate about teaching, very passionate about sharing knowledge and having people's questions answered and understanding how the Canadian system works. And I am a member of St. Peter's Church, so I am very excited to be here and part of the Patrona Festival this evening. So thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Shontel. Brandon?
Hey, good night, everyone. My name is Brandon Hinkson, and I'm a current parishioner at the St. Peter's Parish Church. Currently, I'm doing 4 CAPE subjects, Biology Unit 2, Law Unit 2, and History Unit 2, and the compulsory Caribbean Studies in hopes of later on, after completing my studies, to become an environmental lawyer or a diplomat. As a young person, I really think that Canada opens a wide avenue of opportunities for us, and I'm glad to be here tonight as one of your panelists. So thank you, Ken.
And I must add that he just completed an exam this afternoon. He has exams going on. So all the best to you, Brandon, for the rest of your exams. So this evening we have, you're welcome, we have Nicholai Lynch. Nicholai was born and raised in Barbados, and in 2015, when he was 18, he left Barbados to study structural engineering at Ryerson University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in structural engineering in 2019 and currently works at a company called RJC Engineers in downtown Toronto. Nicholai's biggest interest is basketball, but he would also like to learn how to use new types of software. Interestingly enough, he is learning and trying new foods and recipes, which is what he spent most of the time doing during the pandemic. According to Nicholai, my biggest advice to anyone wondering if they should move to Canada is only do it if you think you can handle all of the responsibilities that come with living on your own and taking care of yourself. Don't do it just because it seems cool or fun or because you want freedom. So that is Nicholai, and we will see and hear more from Nicholai very shortly. Over to you, Brandon.
All right, thank you, Kian. I'm Shontel and Nicholai, but Nicholai is not here physically. I want to pose this first question to you. Why are so many young people actually moving to Canada recently? Your mic's muted, Shontel, sorry.
Obviously, I can only speak for myself. So as to why I moved to Canada, the story behind it is so every couple of summers I would come here, to visit my aunt that lived here. Maybe every 2 or 3 summers while I was growing up, primary school, secondary school, every 2 or 3 summers I would come here to visit my aunt who lived here, and she would she would be like sort of like a host, to me and my mother. We would travel around to different places all over the city, that kind of stuff. And then one time we went downtown and we saw the CN Tower. If anybody that knows Toronto knows anybody knows Canada knows what the CN Tower is. So we went downtown, we saw the CN Tower, and I was just so amazed and inspired by it that I wanted to learn everything that went into making buildings like that what they are. And eventually I learned the person who designs those types of buildings is what's known as a structural engineer. So that is what I wanted to study. Like, that is what I wanted to be when I grew up. And the only place I could learn structural engineering in the Caribbean was at St. Augustine in Trinidad. So I couldn't learn in Barbados. I had to leave Barbados anyway if I wanted to be a structural engineer, right? So The only place I could learn it was at St. Augustine in Trinidad. So, but then my mother came to me with the opportunity. She said, "Would you like to go study in Canada?" I was like, "Yeah, for sure. Why wouldn't I get into study in Toronto, in the city that inspired me to become a structural engineer in the first place? Yeah, like for sure." So, for me, the main reason is I wanted to study structural engineering, and I got the opportunity to study in the city that inspired me to become a structural engineer in the first place. But as to why a lot of people are moving, I mean, yeah, I know I have friends here that come from Barbados as well, you know, that I went to QC with, and they're studying things that they could have learned in Barbados, sure. But as to why they moved, I have no idea why. I honestly can't tell you why people are moving, why a lot of young people are moving to get away from parents, maybe probably to have the freedom to live on your own. Those could definitely be very, very huge factors. Uh, for me, it was mainly education. That's basically it.
Okay. I would say the reason why a lot of young people are moving to Canada in particular are because of the opportunities that present themselves in the Canadian economy. Immigration opportunities. When we look at other places where persons would migrate to, when we look at the big metropolitan cities and the countries that attract a lot of immigrants, when we look at like the Australia, we look at the US, when we look at the UK, there are many opportunities to study and work in these places, but there are not many opportunities to transition that study experience or that work experience into permanently moving to those countries. So I would say one of the reasons why young people are moving to Canada is because of the opportunities that present themselves in terms of the jobs, in some cases, if they are qualified. The education is one of them. And then when you study in Canada, you usually get the opportunity to work after you have studied. So you find that the Canadian immigration system is built in a way that as long as you have invested into the economy as a student, they're usually very welcoming to students to stay on and gain Canadian experience and then also get permanent residence. I also moved to Canada very young. I moved to Canada when I was 19, and I've been in Canada now for over 13 years. And when I first moved to Canada, unlike Nicholai's explanation, like I had no family in Canada. I never actually been to Canada before. I went to England before. I went throughout the Caribbean. I went to the US plenty times, but I've never been to Canada. I never touched foot on Canadian soil before. And I will say that it came down to studying in the UK and studying in Canada. And literally the reason why my parents chose Canada was because it was closer. It was closer in terms of a 5-hour flight, apart from, having a 9-hour flight to Canada. So it was more, to the UK. So it was more accessible for them in the event that anything went wrong. They could get to me faster. They felt a little bit more comfortable with me being in Canada. So having come to Canada, went to Canada as an international student, and staying on. And then I moved back to Barbados for a year. I worked in Barbados, with my dad for a year. And then later on, I came back to Canada and did the whole permanent resident, look for jobs and actually transition into the permanent residence. I will say that is the opportunity and obviously the choices that you would have after migrating in Canada. So I will say it's very welcoming. And that is why a lot of young people are moving there. And the Canadian system, the immigration system, is built towards attracting persons that are young in age. They are, have a lot of education, a lot of work experience, and they want you when you're young. They want you when you're young to, pay into the taxes and, basically contribute to the economy and build families.
Okay, many thanks for that. So Brandon, can you tell us why are you interested in moving to Canada?
Well, I'm interested in moving to Canada mainly for the opportunities, the job opportunities which are available, because obviously Barbados is a very small Caribbean island, and right now many jobs, especially within the legal profession that I'm aiming to get into, are quite full, as most judges work right up into their 70s, some even longer. So this opportunity in terms of me migrating to Canada once I've completed at least my undergrad in law at UWI here, will provide more opportunities for me, sorry, especially within the field of environmental law that I'm hoping to get into.
Yeah, I will say that is, moving to Canada. If you're into environmental law, Canada would have a lot of opportunities for you because we believe in green spaces over here. So in Canada, it's all about, saving energy, is everybody that went to Canada, the first thing that they always say is, it's so clean, the streets are so clean. So they are into a lot of green spaces, and you would find a lot of opportunities here. So you find that in terms of diversity and specialization, there are a lot of different areas that you can branch off into rather than just doing the mainstream, like the mainstream accounting or the mainstream law. You have a lot of different little niches in the market that you could actually get into.
All right, thank you very much. The third question, how would you describe your first week actually living abroad in Canada as opposed to Barbados?
So I'll go first. Okay. My first week was interesting. So I came up from Barbados as this, like really short, bubbly Canadian person. And my first instinct was to tell everybody hello. I would always get on every elevator and I'd be like, hello, good morning. And the first thing that shocked me was a cultural shock. Like, people don't usually do that. They usually, they would speak, they would make some small talk, but, it's out of like being in the elevator, stuck for a little while. It wouldn't be like they're having a full-blown conversation. So the first thing that struck me was the difference. Like in Barbados, like you pass, you speak to people, you're very open. Here it was like people were always in a rush. They were always rushing to get somewhere. Everybody always had something to do. There wasn't much time to really, sit and talk to you or converse like how we would do at home. But as I got into it and I got into the culture, I learned how to still be myself and, still speak to people and stuff, but kind of learn a little discernment in terms of when and where and how. That was one of the things that struck me into moving to Canada. And then the next thing was the customer service. Like, that obviously was very different to Barbados. You go into some place, it's very, everybody is very bent on helping you find like whatever product you need in particular stores. Even in the university, like the university help. Like I found that the Canadians were they were very polite and they were very helpful, right? But then as I went on and I went on and really got integrated into the society, I realized that it wasn't just out of the good natures of their hearts. It wasn't just like a Canadian culture. It is more to do with professionalism, like in their job arenas and their service industries. It's all about catering to the customer, and I realized that it was part of a part of their jobs essentially. But that was one of the things that struck me when I first moved there.
Awesome. So I shall share Nicholas' contribution. Nicholai, where he describes his first week of living in Canada.
I think my first week might be very different from a lot of other people's first weeks. So I came here on August the 30th in 2015. And on September 1st, 2 days later, that was when I moved into the residence building at Ryerson University. And so yeah, my first week, I guess you could say, technically was spent, was my orientation week while I was living in residence at Ryerson University. So for my first week, I actually really enjoyed it. It was like a full week of like no school, just getting to know the campus, getting to know the people that I'm gonna be living with technically for that entire first year, and it was a lot of fun. I will say there are a lot of obvious advantages and disadvantages to not having parents, to not having your parents around. That's like, that goes without saying. But it definitely was a lot of fun, getting to just spend time with new people and making new friends and sort of getting to know them getting to know you. And this is Ryerson University, so these are people that come from all over Ontario, all over Canada. So these people are, even though they're Canadian, even though most of them are Canadian, a lot of them are new to Toronto, just like I am. So we spend a lot of time traveling to different places, getting to know the city, restaurants, tourist attractions, all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. That is what my first week was like. I don't know what other people's first weeks might be like, but I can say mine was a lot of fun, just getting to know the city and getting to know new people.
All right, thank you very much. Now, the fourth question I have, what are the benefits of actually studying and living in Canada right now?
Okay, want me to go first?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, the benefits of studying and living in Canada. Okay, so in the past, I studied in the past. I would say that the benefits were I had to adjust to the learning style in Canada, first of all. It was very different to at home. And I did CAPE, just like you would have done CAPE, and then I went into university right after doing CAPE because I went to the Commerce School. And what I found was that, in university here, they spent a lot, they focused on a lot of interaction. Like it was very different. It was, in school in Barbados, you read, you study, you test, and you either do really good on the test, you do really bad, you study again, you're able to perfect your skills in that way. When I first, in my first week of school in Toronto, I can remember looking, at University of Toronto, I can remember looking at the course, outline, and I can remember seeing like presentations and like participation and all this stuff. And when I actually went into the courses with the instructors, like the professors, they were like, you had to participate. Like you actually had to stand up in like auditoriums with like 100 students, 150 students. So the sheer volume of students in the classes, and you had to, individually participate. Like it was a big part of your mark, like in tutorials. So I find that in terms of studying, in Canada as a student, it really enhances your skills. Like it definitely takes you out of your shells for sure. I cannot say that I was ever a shy person, but whatever little bit of, shyness I would have had, university completely licked that out of me, because you had to really excel. You had to really shine. You had to really work for your marks. I would say that it could be expensive. It runs you, in the thousands, but I did get my money's worth in terms of finishing school with a good set of skills that was able to transition into my working, into employment. So I will say that, was a good benefit. And in terms of living in Canada, obviously you have access, to different things. It's a different way of life. As Nicholai would have said, you have the different types of cultures. Is very multicultural. You have the different types of food. You have the different types of, friends that you meet from all over the world. So definitely is a different experience to being at home, being predisposed to a certain, type of person, or being predisposed to just people that you have grown up with or you have known all your life. In Canada, you definitely are able to, access and tap into other cultures and other experiences, and you build certain sensitivities. So, in Barbados, we're accustomed to a particular type of, we're accustomed to a particular type, like in terms of the news, we will hear one type of struggle, but in Canada opened my eyes to diversity. So as a Black person, a Black Caribbean person moving to Canada, I was surprised, how limited I knew about the outside world and different places and different people and what kind of struggles they had. So I find like having friends from like Germany, or having friends from like, Sri Lanka or different places, like I was able to build a sensitivity and an awareness as to what else is happening in the world. And then in terms of living in Canada, is very convenient. You have access to all kinds of amenities, and yeah, you have longer hours. Your days are longer. So I feel like you can do more in a day, as opposed to being at home where everything closes by 3. I would say 3 o'clock. Yeah, everything closes by 3 o'clock. And I find that in Canada, living in Canada, I like the long weeks, like the Saturdays and Sundays. You could also do your shopping, you could do your banking, you could you could basically do something every day.
Just a question, Shontel. So in your classes, hundreds and 150, as a minority, did you feel the need to use your voice more to kind of educate the class as well as taking an education?
Yes. So in university, I did international development. That was my major. So international development, it looked at the Westernized society and it looked at the developing countries and their struggles. So there were people that, you know, in Canada, in the classrooms that were under the impression that if you're from the Caribbean, you were kind of like, they have the idea or the perception that we were like, I don't know, living in huts, you know, like, I don't know, these weird, obscene ideas. You know, you wouldn't think that people living in this society, having televisions and being exposed to reading materials and internet and so on, you know, you would think that they would know a little better, but some people actually think like, you know, like, yeah, like we just have the beach and coconuts and that is all we have going on. So of course, sometimes I had to really speak up. And I can remember one experience very distinctly. I had this instructor in a professor in a geography class, because I had to do so many different courses in different areas in my international development, because it comprised of many different streams of education. And I can remember this instructor, he was fascinated with Barbados. Apparently Barbados, he did his studies in Barbados, like city studies in Barbados. So I can remember him, you know, putting up a picture of Chefette and KFC and going into this whole long explanation to everybody how Chefette is more popular in Barbados than KFC. And I can remember, you know, I can remember going to him the first day of class and introducing myself and saying, well, I'm from Barbados. And I can remember at that point, he actually told me to stand up like in the class of 200 people and explain, you know, about Chefette and what is a snap box. And I just it was fairly interesting, because I had to really explain, and he was so fascinated. Everything was about Barbados, so fascinating him. So yes, I did find that being in a minority, sometimes I really did have to speak out, and my minority was a little bit different. It wasn't just that I was Black, but you know, I was Black, I was Caribbean, and I had a very heavy Barbadian accent, which I think I still do. So that made for interesting conversations.
Okay, awesome. Chefette is on its own is a business model that I think globally should be studied. Father Peter, he's indicated he wanted to make a contribution, but I think he'll come back. But I just wanted to hear that bit. So I'll play, okay, Father Peter?
He's back.
Yeah.
Yes. I want to introduce on that, at this point, my good friend, Dennis Mears, who is online. He just put on his earphones. Dennis migrated to Canada 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago.
Nice.
And he lives in Ottawa. He went to the University of Carleton University, and he has worked he's worked in Ottawa all his years. He now works for the Barbados High Commission in Ottawa. So Dennis, good evening to you, and happy to have you on. Could you help us and share your experiences of moving from Barbados to Canada 50 years ago, as compared with Shontel, who moved just under 20 years ago? Welcome, Dennis. You have to unmute yourself. You're muted, Dennis.
Oh yeah, she's talking.
You have to unmute yourself, Dennis. Mirrors, you have to unmute yourself. At the bottom left hand of the screen, you got to unmute yourself. While we wait on Dennis to unmute himself, let's ask Canon David how it is as a Canadian to welcome these people from Barbados. In the audience.
That it's very different depending on what area of Canada you come to. Because there's Canada and then there's Toronto. Most of Canada would not identify Toronto as being Canada, or Toronto identify Canada as being anything of importance. So Toronto is a huge city here. It's the Greater Toronto Area. I think 1 in 7 Canadians now live in the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area. And it is extremely, extremely diverse in Toronto. There's 130,000 Italian-speaking people who recognize Italian as their first language, who live in Toronto. I think Toronto is the 10th largest Italian city in the world. I bring that up because I lived in Italy for 4.5 years, and everyone kept asking me if I knew their Uncle Vito in Toronto, because Toronto is very diverse and is very accepting. If you go to other places in Canada, like where I'm living now in Nova Scotia, we have a very large Black community here, and a very large white community here, and a very large Native American community, but not a lot of people from other ethnic groups, not a lot of people from Southeast Asia or from India here in this area. But if you go to Vancouver, of course, there's much more diverse for the Pacific Rim countries. I once lived in the northern eastern side of Canada in Labrador, and I was being sent to Vancouver Island on the west coast permanently to move with the church. And they said that I should drive for 7.5 hours every day, which would be a work day. If I drove the speed limit, it would take me 13 days to get from Labrador to Vancouver Island, because it's that far away. And in fact, today I have a daughter in Vancouver. I'm in Halifax, and I was working in southern France. And my address in southern France is closer to where I am now than my daughter in Vancouver is to where I am now. So Canada is a huge, huge, huge country. Very, very large. I think second largest in the world. And so there's diversity, great diversity in some parts, and then not in others. And then there's other areas that are basically barren of population, and there's very few people per square mile. So it's my brother often says that Canada is a series of regions. It's not really a solid country, because it's almost like all the different islands in the Caribbean. Vancouver is very different than Alberta. Alberta is very different than Newfoundland, and Newfoundland is very different than Quebec, where you have a lot of French-speaking people. So where you settle and where you go to study is extremely important for the type of reception and the type of inclusivity that you will find. Sorry to take that so much.
Dennis.
That is a really good point, because I find that usually international students that go to different parts of Canada, they have different experiences, right? From people that would have settled like in Toronto, or settle in a metropolitan city that has a good diverse ethnicities. So like, yeah, like what you're saying is really important, it's really important to really research where you are going to study, or where you're going to settle in Canada, because it could definitely, impact your experiences. That is true.
All right, so Shontel, what province in Canada state, not too sure how it's divided, but is the
Provinces.
best one, and that a person from the Caribbean should study in terms of culture, proximity?
Oh my. I mean, I moved to Toronto. Okay, I keep saying Toronto. I moved to Ontario, and I haven't moved from Ontario. Like, I always stick to Ontario. We do have in Ontario and in Toronto specifically, we have a wide diverse, we have diversity is really, really good here. It is not a matter of what is better. Because, for instance, like I have some international students, that are clients that are in Vancouver, and they're perfectly fine. There's some people that just don't like the city. Like in Toronto is very city, is not, you don't necessarily get like those green spaces. Some people don't like, they say that it's like a concrete jungle. Some people would more prefer to be studying in a place where there are more green spaces. Some people don't care for the diversity as much. Some people actually want to experience the Canadian culture, not influenced or watered down by any other countries. You find that you could actually exist in Toronto without even identifying with anything Canadian. Some people actually want to experience Canadian culture, and they will go elsewhere and they will have a fantastic experience in their university. So it all depends on the particular type person. I wouldn't say any place in Canada is better than the other place. But I will say that in terms of support, so in Toronto and in Ontario, you have a lot of Barbadians. So if you're a person that you need a lot of support, you need, you know, that familiar face, you need that familiar food, you need that familiar culture, Toronto is really good with that. Especially in the most recent years, I find that a lot of Barbadians have been moving to Toronto, and we have a good Barbadian network here. We have like the, you know, the High Commission in Ottawa, you know, they keep Barbadians connected. The Barbados Consulate in Toronto, they keep Barbadians connected. So there is a lot of support. Now we have a lot of events going on in the summertime, well, apart from COVID, but they have a lot of events going on. You know, it's a very active place. I would say for anybody that is longing for that support, Toronto is definitely the place to be. If you're a type of person that you could more live independently, you know, you could venture out other places. And then don't forget, you could always, in Canada, there are different levels of studies. So there's some people that would come to Toronto and experience like a 2-year college diploma. And when they're more familiar with the country and the type of people in the country, then they could actually venture out and go further. So there's some people that will come and like do their undergrad in Toronto, and then they would move to like Nova Scotia, or they would move to Newfoundland, and they would do their masters, or they would do a higher level of study there. So you have choices.
Okay, awesome. Many thanks for that. So let's hear now from Nicholai in terms of his contribution. Here. So he's talking about what are the benefits of studying and living in Canada.
For all of Canada, I can speak for Toronto, which is where I went to school, which is where I'm living now, which is where I'm working now. It's like there's a big difference between Bridgetown and St. Lucie. Like it's still Barbados, but Bridgetown and St. Lucie are two completely different places, right? Whether you're living and working there, it's two completely different places. So I don't think I can speak for all of Canada. I just think I can speak for Toronto, which is where I went to school, which is where I live and work now. So when it comes to living and studying in Toronto, it's great. I think that the best thing about it is just the experience. It's a very multicultural city. You can see people here from all over the world, talk to people from all over the world. And I just think that seeing and experiencing different cultures, foods, especially the foods, music, talking to people from all over the world, listening to their stories about where they came from and that kind of stuff. I think that is just a really great experience. It kind of gets you out of that Barbados bubble. I feel like sometimes there kind of is a bubble around Barbados, and that people in Barbados don't really know much about other cultures and experience. And I'm not saying you're gonna have like change culture or anything like that, but I just feel like sometimes there's a bubble around Barbados. It's not anything surprising or anything like that. Like it's like Barbados is what, like 99% black people, so it's understandable. But I feel like once you get out of it and you experience other cultures and what they have to offer, you start to really see the world for what it really is. You know, like Barbados is such a small country that you don't really get to see the world for what it really is. When you live in a city like Toronto, you sort of get to see what the rest of you sort of get a taste of what the rest of the world has to offer, because there's so many different cultures in play here. There's so many different experiences you could have. I mean, I think the population of Toronto is 50% immigrants, either people that came here for different countries like me, or people whose parents came here from different countries. So yeah, just that alone I think is the best thing about Toronto, the fact that it's so multicultural and that you can experience and see different and meet people from different countries and different cultures. I think that is hands down the best thing about Toronto.
Okay, so Nicholai made very specific reference to the fact that Canada is indeed a very multicultural society. You have persons coming from the West Indies, you have persons coming from the East Indies, Europe, what's not, actually immigrating to Canada for a better life, better opportunity, and it's very culturally diverse. So Shontel, I just want to pose this next question to you. What are I would best describe it as the social differences between Barbados and Canada, the way persons interact with each other, the way persons' mannerisms and behaviors different from us here in Barbados and the Caribbean as a whole.
Ooh, I think I touched on it a little bit. Customer service is different for sure. When I get off the plane, I'm reminded of the customer service difference at Grantley Adams International Airport for sure. So customer service is different. In Canada, there is a culture about that is about satisfying the customer. So you find that Canadians are particularly helpful in that product and service arena where there's an exchange of products and services. I find that, you know, in Canada, persons are they are polite. In Barbados, we have a culture, in the Caribbean, we have a culture where we pass and we speak to people, we say hello, we say good morning, you know, we actually have conversations with persons. You don't usually find that often in Canada. You find that people would have to, my experiences, I could only speak to my experiences, and I don't know in terms of other places, other parts in Canada, if it's different. But in my experiences, and I've been in Toronto where is very multicultural, people usually have to warm up to you, you know, in order to really speak and say hi. There's always this barrier that is up when you're interacting with persons like for the first time. But if you settle in a place where there are Caribbean people, then that is different. Everybody speaks to everybody. You have the Guyanese, you have the Bajans, you have the Grenadians, like everybody are speaking, everybody's, you know, it feels a lot like home, right? Still. So I would say one of the things that is different in terms of how people interact is that, like, how to explain it, in Barbados, you know, everybody lives around family, like everybody your neighbor is like your family. In Canada is really not like that. For instance, like I live in an apartment building, like just for instance, and I have been in that building for 7 years. And for the first time this year is when I like actually connected with one of my neighbors on the same floor, right? And I have been seeing the person for 7 years and speaking, like saying hi, but in terms of actually having a conversation and bonding with that person that you can actually come over and get some tea or something like that, it's not like that. So that's one thing to be useful to get used to in Canada. Like there's not that much support, right? If you are here with your family and so on, and you have a network of people already, but if you are moving, you know, for the first time, but you don't have that network, like Nicholai said, you have to be prepared to like live independently because that support is not there. People kind of like stay in their own corners. Yeah. Next question.
Yeah. So we all know that Canada typically has a very, very cold climate. Sometimes in the summer, the temperatures rise extremely high and is somewhat reminiscent to that of Barbados and the Caribbean. But can you please describe your first experience of a winter in Canada? Was it snowy? Was it bitterly cold?
Okay, my first winter was the winter of 2008, and that was a horrible winter. Like in general, it was a horrible winter. I would tell you that, you know, like I actually have like a love-hate relationship with the snow. Like I have only had one, you know, everybody from Barbados, they want to see snow. They want to, you know, see snow. They want to be in the snow, and you want to see snow. You want to be in snow until you actually get in the snow. And I have only ever liked snow once, and that was the first time that I had my winter. I could remember coming home from an exam. When I went into the exam at University of Toronto, there was no snow on the ground. And by the time the examination wrapped up and I was coming out of the exam, there was a snowstorm. And I can remember actually walking home in that snowstorm, like outside just completely was so dark. And I can remember literally being, you know, like the wind was so high and it was so light that the wind literally picked me up and I just landed on my backside in the snow. And that was, you know, for me, that was the reality check. Like you're not in Barbados anymore. And this snow is not going anywhere anytime soon. That was my first experience. But I will say that as you go on in the snow, you get used to it. And for me, one thing that was very hard for me was how Canadians had just loved it. You know, they got excited when the weather changed and, you know, when it was winter, they got excited. But then I kind of, as I went on, I kind of learned how to cope with it. So there are different seasons in Canada, and we need to appreciate all those seasons, and we have to find things to do in those seasons. So it's only when I actually started to get out in the winter time and start to do winter type activities that I started to appreciate the winter and appreciate the different seasons. So yeah, my first winter was interesting. It was a stark reality that this is what I signed up for. But that fear too, in addition to the experience, that fear was built in before I actually moved to Canada, because I can remember telling individuals in Barbados that I was moving to Canada, and just like you said, Brandon, the first thing they told me, oh, you're going to that country, it's so bitter cold, it's going to be really cold, like how you're going to manage. But really and truly, when you get into Canada and you warm up, like you're only ever in the winter time, especially in a city like Toronto, you're only ever outside in the cold if you're like waiting for a bus or if you're going for a walk. But really and truly, it's kind of the whole the country setup is like you're not just outside in the cold. Like every building is warm, right? The buses are warm, the transportation is warm. So it's not that much of an inconvenience, right? I would find it's something that you never ever get used to. Like I would never ever say like I love the winter, but it's definitely something that you learn to live with and appreciate. It's not scary.
I mean, we have hurricanes here, so it's no different. You can't have everything perfect.
So your hands are like bitter cold, and you can't, so you're breathing, and you can actually see the the smoke when you're breathing. Yeah, but it's really not that bad. In that and the trick is to go home. Like I find that when I do travel home in the winter time, my winter seems shorter. For some reason, the 2 weeks or 1 week in the sunshine, it kind of resets my body back. And when I go back, I'm good to I'm good to go again. Yeah, it's not that bad though.
The one thing I will say about Toronto, I love Toronto winter because there's the path network. So you really don't have to come up unless you really, really, really have to, because there's a subway network of, you could get to malls, stores, everywhere you want to go on the path network. So you don't have to see that snow.
Yeah, all on the ground, right? Right. It's kind of set up in a way that if you're working in the financial district or something downtown, you don't ever have to be, you don't ever have to be like outside in the cold. You actually are in the warmth all the time. Right. The only thing I would say is that like with the is a completely different experience. Like when you own a home or you have a car, like the shoveling the snow, that's the only thing that gets you, the shoveling the snow. But apart from that, like it's really not that inconvenient. It's not a big thing. A lot of people from Barbados think that, transitioning and being in the winter is going to be a big thing. That is not a determining factor as whether you're going to stay or whether you're going to go. It really hardly you hardly find people leaving Canada because of the winter. It's usually other reasons.
Okay, sounds good. So let's hear from Nicholai now in terms of how was his first winter experience. And his experience was a bit different. So let's hear Nicholai.
Watch this movie or watch this TV show, and then they tell you, oh, it's the greatest TV show ever, greatest movie ever. You're gonna love this and this and that and this and that. And then when you go and you watch it, and then when you go and you're watching it, and then it's like, okay, it's not bad, but I mean, like, it's not the way you made it out to be. Like I felt like the winter experience was kind of overhyped. So when I came into it, I had all these ideas about people telling me, oh, it's gonna be so bad, you're gonna hate it. I don't know how you're gonna deal with it. Especially since when I came, it was my very first winter. I never experienced winter before, like in a Christmas vacation, travel to Canada, anything like that. So I never experienced winter before. So when I came in, I was like, okay, this is gonna be bad. I know I'm gonna hate it, but then when I actually experienced it, I realized this isn't that bad. Like, sure, like it's not the best thing in the world, but I mean, it's very, very manageable. People just very overhyped it, and it actually wasn't that bad. I actually kind of liked it. Barbados, as great of a country as it is, 30 degrees all day, every day is kind of annoying. Changing seasons is pretty good, especially when you have those periods where it's like fall and spring, where it's like 20, 21, 22 degrees. Those are the best times. So yeah, winter definitely not a problem, and changing seasons is one of the best things about Canada as a whole.
Brandon?
Yes. Next question. We live in an era right now where racial tensions are at ever high. We saw last year with George Floyd being killed because of the color of his skin. And I just want to pose this question now. Have you ever been subject to prejudice based on your race or simply due to your nationality as a Caribbean citizen?
Okay. I have never experienced prejudice firsthand, where I'm at. I have never been in a situation where I felt uncomfortable about my race or questioned my race or had an experience where I'm like, oh, wow, that is racism. I did in my line of work dealing with clients and also dealing with students. I did hear a fair share of horror stories, from persons that actually had that firsthand experience. So all of my accounts are by way of persons having that second-hand experience, like persons actually telling me the stories and me living vicariously through their experiences. But I will say that I do feel like in a professional environment in Canada, even in Toronto, being that is multicultural, I do feel that I have to prove myself. As an individual, who is Black, who is Caribbean, who's female, who's young. I'm in a field and a line of work where, persons are usually much older. My line of work, people, the atmosphere, at work, in teaching and being a college instructor, persons are predominantly in that area. So I do feel like I have to prove myself. But I've never blatantly experience prejudice that would make me uncomfortable, and I'm thankful for that. I thank God for that. But still, there are situations and issues where you would hear, and from what I hear from persons, both professionally and in terms of school, in academics, a lot of the prejudice in Toronto and in Canada, is systematic. So you would find it by way of persons for instance, in a working environment, not getting a particular position, is always an assumption I assume that I didn't get this position because of, my race, but it's never a situation where it's blatant. But I've heard of other parts in Canada where persons have, face-to-face encounters with certain levels of disrespect.
So let's hear Nicholai's contribution. Nicholai explains that he hasn't necessarily heard or experienced it, but he can understand from the environment within which he lives in. So let's listen to Nicholai.
Toronto is a very multicultural city. 50% of the people that live in this city, 50% of the 3 million people that live in this city, I think it's 3 million. 50% of the 3 million people that live in this city either came from a different country like me, or their parents came from a different country. So they might be Canadian, but then their parents are immigrants. So anytime you live in a city like that, there is going to be racism. As much as we hate to admit it, racism is a part of human nature. I mean, obviously we hope that changes, but as right now, as long as humans exist, and as long as there are humans from different cultures, ethnicities and that kind of thing, racism is going to exist. That's just not something, that's just the way life is right now. So, and yes, there is racism in Toronto. Have I ever been the subject of it? Luckily, no. I think I've found myself to be surrounded by people that, that people are not racist, the people that treat me the same way they would treat anybody else regardless of race. I mean, have I ever been the subject of racial discrimination without knowing about it? Maybe. Maybe when I go for job interviews and that kind of stuff, maybe they see that I'm Black and decide that they don't want to hire me. I mean, I wouldn't know. But yeah, I've never been the sole. I've never knowingly been the target of racial discrimination. But I will say that you do see a lot of stuff, especially if you're on social media, of racial discrimination against other races. Like I said, there are people from all over the world here. People from India, China, every country in the world you can imagine here. And you do see on social media sometimes people in your city that may be, and you see instances of crimes like that are racially motivated crimes that happen down the street from you, depending on where you live, that happen down the street from you, and you think about, okay, yeah, this is happening in my own backyard, because racial discrimination isn't really a thing in Barbados when you have a country that's 99% black people, where everybody's black, so there's no racially motivated crimes in Barbados. But when you're here and you hear about crimes that happen down the street from you that are racially motivated, it really makes you look at it and say, okay, well, this is real. Like, it's not just me in a country miles and miles away looking at it on social media saying, okay, well, that sucks, but whatever, like, it doesn't affect me. But then when you realize that it's happening down the street from you and that it could easily affect you the same way it affected those people, it really does make you look at things differently and make you realize, okay, well, this really is a much bigger deal than I thought it was. And that you really need to surround yourself with people that aren't going to judge you based on the color of your skin. So, like I said, I've never knowingly been the target of it, but I know people that have been. I've heard of stories about people that have had about racially motivated crimes that happen not too far away from me. So it really makes you more cautious of the world around you.
Yeah, true. I just have something to add to what Nicholai said. I had a student last semester, and she lived in a part of Canada that's called Winnipeg. And Winnipeg is not as multicultural as Toronto, is like predominantly white. They have a large First Nations population. And she said that she was living in Winnipeg for around 25 years, and she recently moved to Toronto within the last 5 years or so. And she said that her racial experience, where she was discriminated against, was in Toronto. So it doesn't matter where you are, like Nicholai is saying, racism is practically everywhere. Sometimes is blatantly right in front of your face, and then sometimes is not. But I find that moving to Canada, what it did for me is that in Barbados is very different being in a country where you look around and you see you see your prime minister is black, you see your teachers black, you see everybody in positions of power being black. Moving to Canada and socializing with different types of races, especially black persons in Canada that were like second generations, third generations in Canada, and black persons that migrated to the US, it did make me sensitive to things that would happen in other parts of the world. So I would say in Barbados, I was in a bubble with respect to race and how bad it could get. But when I moved to Canada, it's like your eyes are open and sensitivity to certain things because you mix with different people that had different experiences, and your eyes kind of open up in a bit. So yeah.
All right, so one more question before we open the floor for any questions from any persons on the Zoom right now. And the final question is simply, when is the prime time to migrate to Canada?
The prime time to migrate to Canada would be when you're young. Like I would say, an individual that is, finishing up high school in Barbados, and they're looking for, to get into their, their education. They're looking to build their education, build their future. That would be a prime time, because in Canada, they like, when people invest in a Canadian education. Like I said before, they do set the foundation for you to, get work permits after you study, and also to get permanent residence, after you have gained Canadian work experience. That will be a prime time. And then another prime time to move to Canada would have been, would be when you have gotten your education from Barbados and elsewhere, and you have your work experience, which we will call skilled work experience. So you go to university, you get your degree, you go to college, and then you have that work experience to go with it. So you actually, was in a job after having that after having that education for like a year, or 2 years or 3 years, and you're relatively young and you're looking to migrate to Canada. I would say those are the prime times. But with that being said, it's not impossible for anybody at any age to move to Canada. It's just that you have better chances, the younger you are and more educated with skilled work experience.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, we are now at 7:59 p.m. So we are going to open the floor for about 10 to 15 minutes. If you have any burning questions, feel free to ask away. The floor is now open. I have one question thus far on WhatsApp. Shontel, would you be able to speak specifically to the immigration process if you're trying to migrate but not as a student? Would you be able to speak generally about that?
Well, there are over 100 immigration programs in Canada between the provinces and also between federally. So I wouldn't be able to speak generally about it because everybody is different. I will say that one of the popular programs that persons migrate to Canada under is called the Express Entry. You could look it up online. The Express Entry is the main program. If you're outside Canada, you're looking to get in, you're looking to migrate for permanent residence. The Express Entry usually presents a good opportunity. With respect to if you're ineligible for the Express Entry, I would lean back on being a student or looking for a job in Canada.
Okay, and just forgive me, I have to share Shontel's business card because I've been learning a lot about Shontel today, and can you see it? As
Yes,
an regulated Canadian immigration consultant, Shontel, would you be able to tell us some of your services, first of all, and at what point in time should a Barbadian family contact you and say, Shontel, I wish to enlist your services because I want to move myself and my son to Canada in about 5 years' time?
Okay, you can contact me anytime. Like, my business hours are from Monday to Saturday, and you can contact me by WhatsApp. The number here, I'm actually on WhatsApp as well. You could email me. I like to have consultations via Zoom or consultations via WhatsApp calling or via the telephone. That way you could have a personalized consultation based on your own unique the requirements and the program that suits you best. In terms of areas that I practice, like I do a lot of study permits, I deal with work permits, LMIAs, visitor visas. I basically deal with every area of Canadian immigration, like family sponsorships, permanent residency, express entry again. And I also deal with particularly difficult cases. So when persons are in Canada and they have overstayed in Canada, or they have, they are what we would say they have overstayed their status, so they don't have status in Canada. I deal with humanitarian and compassionate cases as well, because the Canadian immigration system is very forgiving. So I deal with all types of immigration cases, and humanitarian and compassionate are my specialty.
Okay,
sorry
awesome.
about that.
Sorry. That's fine. Okay, sounds good. A question in the chat. Would you recommend that persons secure a job before moving to Canada?
Yes and no. The Canadian immigration system I would say it's very difficult to get a job in Canada right off the bat. Because when we're looking at getting jobs in Canada, the Canadians and permanent residents have to take priority. So when you're looking for a job in Canada, you have to bear in mind that the government kind of put the pressures on the employer to hire Canadians and permanent residents. And if you can't find a Canadian or permanent resident, you have to justify hiring anybody else. So that would mean when you're looking for a job in Canada, it's not as simple as you interview and then they give you a job. It gets into complexities like the employer has to advertise that job nationally. The employer has to justify offering you as the foreign national the job, as opposed to any other Canadian or permanent resident. So I would say that, obtaining a job in Canada is not impossible, but there are other factors and other complexities that you have to understand. If you are a person that is more eligible for permanent residence might be the best footing to get into Canada rather than, so it's easier sometimes to get permanent resident to Canada than to actually get a job in Canada. And how our system is set up is that you don't require a job in order to get permanent residence in Canada.
All right, so a question here in the chat. In terms of the language exam, can it be done from Barbados or online?
Unfortunately, the language test is not offered online, and the language test, there are no testing centers in Barbados. At the moment, the closest testing centers in the Caribbean are Trinidad and Jamaica. And there are also testing centers in Miami and across the US, but there are no testing centers in Barbados. That is something that I'm advocating for in the near future. So if you're staying put and staying up to date, that is something that might be coming to us soon, but we don't have a testing center in Barbados as yet.
We will fully support any initiative to make Barbadians as multilingual as possible, because Canada speaks English as well as French, and would having 2 languages actually increase your opportunities in Canada?
Yes.
Shontel?
Yes. So Canada, you know, when we think about Canada, sometimes we think that the only French speaking part of Canada is Quebec, and that is untrue. Canada is bilingual. So I mean, French, especially, like, you know, we have to be careful when we say different languages, because Canada is French and English. So the French and English can be used in any area, any part of Canada. Both when you go to Canada, you see that all these signs are in English and French. So yes, somebody that has English they have good opportunities. But if you have French, if you speak French as a second language, you know, there are a wealth of opportunities for you, and the immigration programs are even more extensive. So the French speaking population in Canada is a minority right now, and the Canadian government has a particular objective to have more persons that speak French in Canada. So you find that even if you have immigration programs that are open for a short while for English speaking persons, you find that the French speaking programs, they're usually open all year round. So yes, you can have more opportunities if you speak French as well. Yes, please. I see there's a question here. Somebody was asking if I had to save money to buy proper seasonal clothing. Yes, in Canada, you usually have to buy, the proper clothing to be comfortable in the winter. So yes, that's something that you should budget for.
Yes, it doesn't come cheap, but it is well worth it. It's when you have a nice winter coat, it keeps you well warm, as well as layering up.
That is one thing that you should spend, that you could spend a lot of money on. Yeah, a nice winter coat.
I see in the chat, Jaden Rochester has asked if there will be a recording. Yes, it is being recorded, and it will be posted to the church's Facebook page. So I shall place the link in the chat in a short while. Brandon, over to you.
Don't have a question right now, but Shontel, let me pose a question to you. For me as a kid student, would my qualifications actually be of any merit in terms of actually trying to acquire a job in Canada per se?
Your CAPE qualifications?
Mm-hmm.
I would say not, because how they measure CAPE is just underneath like the requirements to get like your bachelor's. I would say if you want to further your education in Canada, the CAPE would count to something. So I did CAPE as well at Combemer, and I found that when I went to University of Toronto, the majority of my credits for the first year were complete. So our CAPE program in the Caribbean is very, very good with that in terms of the transition. But in terms of getting a job, like they usually require a post-secondary certificate, which is anything that you would do after secondary school. So any associate degree or a diploma, or a bachelor's or master's or something would more contribute to getting a job. One time when you did CAPE, you got an associate degree, but I'm not sure if they do that anymore.
we still get the associate degree. You get it in either the sciences, humanities.
Okay. So bear in mind that any kind of education that you have, when we're looking at Canadian immigration that is not Canadian, it has to be assessed according to Canadian standards. So usually you have to apply for what we will call an evaluation, like an education credential assessment, and that credential assessment assesses your education from outside on the Canadian standards. So basically they go with what that educational credential says, and the employers usually look for that as well. So if you were to get your CAPE assessed, and it was to come back and say that you do have an associate degree, and you present that to employers, it could increase your chances. But if it doesn't say is an associate degree, then I would say the more education you have is better.
All right, thank you. A question here in the chat: is there any website where you can actually find all the programs which are offered by the Canadian government?
Yes, so you can find the information on www.canada.ca, which is the main Canadian government website. And for every province in Canada, they have their own immigration website. So there are 100 programs federally, which is on the government website. And then every province has its own immigration website. So if you were to go to Google and you just type the name of the province that you're interested in and you put immigration, their provincial immigration website would come up. But in terms of the federal website for most of the Canadian immigration programs on a federal level, it is www.canada.ca. And when you go to that website, you select Immigration and Citizenship Canada.
All right, thank you. Another question in the chat: in addition to being bilingual, what other assets would enhance your chances or make it easier to successfully migrate to Canada?
So the language test is a main thing. The higher you get in the language test, the better it is for your scores on express entry. If your education is another thing, and the years of work experience and your age. So sometimes, the system is a little biased towards persons that are younger. So you find that persons that are younger get higher points than persons that are a little older. So, yeah.
Okay. Anyone from the audience would like to just unmute their mic and just talk to us? Pose your
Ask any questions?
Yeah.
Well, I don't have any questions, but I do want to say thank you very much. I found this very informative. And I don't know anyone who wants to migrate to Canada, but you never know when you might, interact with someone who asks the question. And at least I can now say, I can answer some of the questions for them. What's even more important, Shontel, I can point them to you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you all very much. And Brandon, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, good luck, Brandon.
As you begin the next phase in your chapter in your book of life.
Yes, please. Thank you.
If I could ask a question, because I want to ask it the other way, and that is because I don't know much about Barbadian society, so I wondered if any of these things will be a barrier, because Canadian society is particularly a liberal society. We have a strong ethic, I think, for women's rights, for the rights of gay and lesbian people. The Anglican Church, the Episcopal Church here, the Anglican Church of Canada now is approved in most places to conduct the marriage of same-sex couples. I think in every province, women have reproductive control over their own reproductive health, and can, although we don't support abortion on demand, it is certainly available through the healthcare system here. And so I wondered if are those things that would be shocking to people coming from Barbados, to come to a country and suddenly be run into this situation that you might be saying, these are a bunch of heathens up here in Canada. I don't know. So that could be as shocking to people as winter, I think. I don't know.
Well, not really. The reason why I say not really, I think that a lot of Barbadians, we're heading in a direction in Barbados where, persons are so, we're so modernized now, we're so westernized. Like everybody watch like US television shows, everybody are so up to date with everything. Like honestly, sometimes I don't get the news that happen. I don't get the news of things that happen in the US, from here. Like I get the things that are happening back home. Like they actually tell me, hey, do you know this is happening? Like they actually tell me, like, do you know Canada closing down? Like I'm in Canada and they're giving me the news of, what is happening in Canada. So I would say that these civil liberties that we do have in Canada, I don't think that they're they're not anything new to the persons down there. But I will say that when they do come to Canada with respect to certain things like same-sex relationships and same-sex marriages and so on, that is something that they do take advantage of here, right? They are well aware that they do have these civil liberties over here, and that is the motivation for persons to move. So we only spoke about like really economic programs and students, but then there's the refugee question, right? Like there are a lot of persons that come up from Barbados and they make refugee claims in Canada, and the refugee claims are, the basis of these claims are, based on some hardship that they would have home and not being accepted, but not by the general public, more by the laws, like more by the constraints within the laws that force them not to live according to how they would want to live. So I would say that they're knowledgeable of it, and they use that as a way to get to Canada sometimes.
Thanks.
No problem.
Any more questions? Father Peter, would you like to say anything before you hand over to Tito for the vote of thanks? On mute, please.
Have I? Yes, I have. Any with Shontel, any problems that she will incur at work, in her working environment that might be important to pass on or to share?
My working environment problems.
No, but I mean with the whole, you are an immigration consultant. What are the issues you deal with?
I deal with a lot of sensitive issues. One of my main challenges, especially in the Barbadian communities, that we have a community that we like to talk. And, being that I'm a Barbadian, and I come across as, like down to earth, we don't really understand confidentiality in my line of work. So sometimes I find, persons asking some out of the way questions with respect to other persons' cases because we have such a small community. But once they understand, the logistics of how it works and the professionalism and how certain things are done, that is usually taken care of. That is usually fine. So in my line of work, is very sensitive. Like I find that immigration and person status in Canada is very, 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 very sensitive, and sometimes it gets very emotional. So my job goes into not only giving people immigration advice, but also giving them, like life counseling and actually pointing them in the direction where they could get certain support services. So I've found myself collaborating with like the Barbadian consulate, collaborating with certain churches. So here in Ontario, through the Grace Anglican Church in Scarborough, I actually run a pro bono clinic that was prior to COVID. As soon as COVID is lifted up, we'll be able to start that back soon, but basically give those persons in Canada, that, may not be able to afford it, the opportunity to have, fair and free legal counsel. So yeah, it's just about sharing knowledge, and a lot of people are misled. So one of my passions is to, like kind of recorrect or redirect by sharing knowledge and pointing people in the right path, because I find that immigration is a way that so many people want to get to Canada, and some people are a little bit desperate in their approach, and they could be misled. Like there are a lot of scams out there. There are a lot of people that are dishonest, and one of the things that I want to do is try to educate as many people as possible, especially our people in Barbados, so that we would have at least the right advice and the proper counsel when making those decisions.
Yes, because I see on my computer a lot, on a number of occasions, offers to come to Canada and telling me I'm bombarded with this thing that your visas are waiting you and all these things. Just sending your information, sending your full names and all these, so that you're welcome to Canada.
Yep. And sometimes there are programs where, they actually lead people right up to get into Canada, and people are actually coming to the airport in Canada, getting on the planes, coming to the airport in Canada, and then they're telling the officers, oh, I applied for this. And when the officers look in the system, is a whole scam. Sometimes they come to Canada and there are no opportunities. So, my job is to help get the word across to as many people as possible.
So all we're saying is that you have to be careful the channels that you use, that people use,
Yes.
and to look at how authentic people are, and then some
Yes.
person that you could be a person of reference that you can make a reference to.
Pardon?
That persons can make a reference to people like you.
Yeah,
Who are
yeah.
authentic. You're in the system. You know what's going on, and you can help.
Yes, I usually tell individuals that unless you get the information directly from the Canadian website, you need to cross-reference every single thing that you would have been sent by email or you would have been sent somebody. Like me, when I deal with clients and I send clients information, like I always send them the link or I always send them the source where they could get this information and they could see for themselves that this is the information that's coming from the government. There are a lot of scams out there, and they just make up things and they send people blast emails and get people excited, and then people lose a lot of money, right? And sometimes it's not even about the money, sometimes it's about identity theft, right? You put your information into these systems and then they steal your identity. So I usually tell people, like I'll say it again, the main website for Canada is www.canada.ca. And that website is the government's website, and whatever information or program that the government is coming up with in Canada, it would always be posted on that website. Always be posted on that website.
What about the lotteries? The lotteries, people put their hands put themselves into lotteries to get into Canada and hoping to win the lottery to get into Canada.
Well, in Canada, there's only one type of lottery that we would have, and that is the express entry. Any other lottery that you would hear about, I've heard about these lotteries that people are having, and really and truly, I'm in the field, and in Canada, we don't have that lottery system. In the US, because for a while I practiced US immigration, they actually have an actual lottery system in the US, but that is not something that we practice in Canada. So usually with these lotteries, when people go into these lotteries, it's kind of like just to hook them in, and then they feed them, false information, false promises. And then the persons, pay them a certain amount of money, and then they just disappear. They go dark, and you don't hear anything about that again. We only have express entry and programs that come through the provinces. There are no lotteries. It's not what it's trying to say is that it's not by when you do migrate to Canada and you're embarking on a permanent resident application for Canada, it's very deliberate. Right? Like everything is very meticulous and very deliberate and very articulated. So it's all about your education, your work experience, that type of information. They're not pulling somebody based on a lottery or by chance. It's not like that. Canada, they want particular people and they want you to have a particular criteria. So there are no lotteries.
I hear you saying that it can be very slow then as well, is what I think I hear you saying.
You mean in coming into Canada?
Yeah, that it's a process that might take months and months. How long do you find that it takes for an application?
It depends on the type of application. So there are many different types of permanent resident applications. The express entry application that most people from Barbados would be coming under, that program, and I'm not talking about COVID times, I would say that the general expectation for somebody applying for permanent residence to wrap up the entire process from applying to actually come into Canada would take them like a year. A year of complete, that is applying, that is going through all the admissibility criteria, because in Canada, they check your admissibility. So you have to give them police references, you have to give them police character references, we call them police certificates, you have to do a medical, there's a whole procedure. And then there's some applications that could take longer than a year. Express entry, on the front end of express entry, because it's generally in 2 steps. We don't know how long the front end of the process takes because that is determined on the particular applicant and what type of criteria they have personally. But the government has committed to processing express entry applications within 6 months. And prior to COVID, they have been doing that. So you would say express entry application was taking around 8 months to process, or around 9 months to process, but the most I would say a year. But with COVID, there's no telling. So it's not something that you apply today and you get permanent residence 3 months after. It doesn't work that way. It actually takes time.
I see Kay has a statement to me about Denise Mears, and I introduced Dennis an hour ago, and Dennis went off the program. He does a lot of programming in Ottawa. He works for the Barbados government in the High Commission office in Ottawa. His twin sister, who left at the same time, Denise, they were both born in UK, and we came down to their grandparent, grandmother and aunt here in Barbados. And then just around 11 years old, they moved off to Canada. And Denise has worked for the Canadian government in Ottawa, and Denise is now retired. So Denise is willing to come on, I'm told. So Denise Mears, welcome to you, Denise. You have to unmute, and we are willing to we're happy to hear something from you. You're not getting Denise. Denise? Okay, she's not, well, she probably has missed some of it. I just only saw the message. Yes, Kay, back to you then.
Okay, no problem. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this nice Friday night. I would like to pass it on to Mr. Tito Hines to give us a vote of thanks before we close officially. And then I'll allow Father Peter to close in prayer. Tito?
Hi, good night. Are you hearing me good?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So yeah, on behalf of the rector and the parochial church council and the entire family here at St. Peter's, we'd like to thank the entire panel for a very informative session here tonight. To you, Shontel, for sharing your expertise as an immigration consultant, along with your very educational and personal insights. I believe that she made a value ambassador for the product overseas. To you, Brandon, for some very stimulating and thought-provoking questions. Nicholai, even though he wasn't here with us, physically or virtually, for taking the time to record and share the experiences, and it would definitely benefit all of us who, thinking of moving abroad as well. Of course, to our moderator, Ms. Kiansky, for your setting the tone, a very light-hearted and vibrant discussion we all have tonight. And of course, to the parishioners of St. Peter, to spend the time, as Kay just said, on our Friday night, you gave your time and you came and pray that you would have taken something of it. I definitely have learned a lot in this, I would call it a crash course in immigration. All the notes of like, but I would definitely be reviewing the recording and just sharing with persons I know, in my own sphere. I work at university, so but persons sometimes who may have questions about, next steps. We probably have to really think about expand our reach of these shores as work becomes more global and we move forward. Opportunities lie for us very far and abroad, and we can special arrange and follow your example, Shontel, and Nicholai, who would have made that step to go abroad. So once again, thank you to the Christians as well for spending this another year at the Summer Festival with us, even in the midst of the global pandemic. We have been able to diversify our experience of worship and gain a lot of information, and hopefully it will take us very far in the coming year. And I look forward to probably a part 2, our follow-up discussion to see, how everyone is definitely progressing going forward. And best luck to Brandon, and hope to see you, make that step soon. Thanks, everyone.
Father Peter?
Thanks, Tito. And let me say thanks also to the number of people here on who are from the United States, family and friends, also other people who will be sharing via Facebook later on as it is recorded. Thanks to some of our young people, some looking towards the future. The Prime Minister spoke today about trying to keep people in Barbados and trying to find jobs and provide jobs in Barbados. I'm sure that we've provided another thought for you, another avenue of where to go and how we're going to get it done. We can expand on this as a way of bringing people together. And speaking to Kian before, there's a young lady that she knows she might be on it. I'm not too sure, but she offers works with bringing down universities to Barbados to give information on universities, and probably the next one in a few weeks' time will be on that. So we have something more to look forward to. and there's always a joy of working in a parish for a number of years. Kian, Dr. Skeete is one of my first confirmation candidates. Tito is one of my first confirmation candidates. I see Canon Davis, well, that's 22 years ago, 23 years ago in St. Peter. Shontel is one of my, one of my favorite confirmation candidates years ago. And well, we've kept in contact when she's here in Barbados. And happy when she spoke to me a few weeks ago. She called about baptism for one of her relatives' kids, and she told me what she was doing. I saw it being expressed in this way. And she had worked with Kiam without even knowing it. They were working together with the University of West Indies with a discussion that Shontel Atkinson had done for the University of West Indies, and Dr. Skeete was able to say straight away, yes, she's a good prospect. And I knew Brandon, who's my wife's nephew, my nephew too. He's interested in it, and it's somewhere where he can grow and others will be able to grow. So I'm thanking them all. For Canon David, thank you for your Canadian interjection in it all. And as usual, I'm going to ask you to end in prayer, Canon David. Oh, sorry, I'm told I've forgotten Nicholai. Yes, Nicholai is not on. But again, Nicholai is one of my confirmation candidates. So I've followed them around, and I know where some are, and you build a special relationship as a priest with your candidates along the ways. You build a pastoral relationship. You're like a father and will always be like a father and a big brother to them. So you can call on them and they're always there and ready to help and assist, you know, and Tito too, huh? Right. So yeah, all of my children. Canon David?
Thank you. You honor me by inviting me, and I do feel like I've walked into a family here with all of these great connections. So let us pray. Blessed and holy God, your Holy Spirit hovered over the waters at the time of creation. And hovering over the waters, I'm sure the Holy Spirit went from island to island and country to country as you fashioned and created this fragile planet, our island home, this planet Earth. We ask you to bless all the nations and all people who are seeking care and shelter this night. We pray particularly for refugees and for people that are economic migrants who are looking for work and looking for places to stabilize their family. We ask you to bless us as we discuss movement of peoples between these two great countries. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Good night, and thanks for being a part of all of this, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Shontel, Brandon, awesome job. It was a pleasure. I will do this again anytime.
Great, yes,
Okay.
very good.
Thanks for being coordinated.
Pardon?
No, saying thanks again for being coordinated for all this.